It was a crisp autumn evening in Carmel-by-the-Sea, California, a quiet, picturesque coastal town known for its stunning views and charming little shops. Among its many hidden treasures was an old, rustic steakhouse, the Mission Ranch restaurant, a cozy spot with dim lighting, the scent of sizzling ribeye in the air, and a soft piano playing in the background. It was the kind of place where people came to unwind, sip fine wine, and enjoy a meal without the chaos of big city life. But tonight, something unexpected was about to happen, something that would leave the entire staff and customers talking for years to come. "You look like you just walked out of a Western movie." At one of the corner tables, an elderly man in a weathered leather jacket sat alone, quietly nursing a glass of whiskey. His silver hair was neatly combed back, his face lined with the kind of rugged charm that came from a life well lived. He was a man of few words, but his piercing gaze carried a quiet authority. He had been sitting there for about 15 minutes, patiently waiting to place his order. But no one had come. Waitress Jessica Miller, a 24-year-old with a sharp tongue and a bit of an attitude, finally strolled over. She had been working at the Mission Ranch for a few months but had no patience for what she called grumpy old men. "Sorry for the wait," she said with a forced smile, barely looking at him as she flipped open her notepad. "What can I get you?" The man looked up at her, his blue eyes calm and steady. "Just a steak. Medium rare." Jessica scribbled it down but didn't walk away immediately. Instead, she looked him over with a smirk. "You know, you look like you just walked out of a Western movie." A few nearby diners turned their heads, sensing the tension in the air. The man simply chuckled, taking a slow sip of his whiskey. "Is that so?" Jessica, oblivious to who she was speaking to, continued. "Yeah. Like one of those old cowboy actors my grandpa used to watch." She laughed. "Clint Eastwood or something." The restaurant suddenly grew quieter. A couple at the next table glanced at each other, their eyes widening. The bartender, who had been wiping down a glass, froze mid-motion. Jessica didn't notice. She had already turned to walk away when she muttered under her breath, "Some old guys really think they're still movie stars." A sudden silence, and a shocking realization: Jessica hadn't even made it 5 steps when she heard a chair scrape against the floor. The man stood up. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a leather wallet, and casually dropped something onto the table. It wasn't money. It was a business card. Jessica, annoyed at being called back, sighed and walked over. But as soon as she read the name, her face turned pale. It said, "Clint Eastwood, owner, Mission Ranch Restaurant." For a few seconds, Jessica just stood there, blinking. Then, as if someone had just dumped a bucket of ice water over her head, it hit her all at once. She had just insulted one of the most legendary actors and directors in Hollywood history. Not only that, he literally owned the restaurant she worked at. Her stomach dropped. Oh. My. God. She slowly looked up to see Clint staring at her, one eyebrow slightly raised, his expression unreadable. "So. Do I still get my steak?" The entire restaurant had gone silent. Everyone was watching. Jessica's mind raced. She could already see herself getting fired on the spot. Maybe even humiliated. Maybe he'd make a scene. But then, Clint Eastwood did something that no one expected. He smiled. Not a smirk. Not a grin. A full, genuine, amused smile. Then, in that signature slow, gravelly voice, he said, "So, do I still get my steak?" The restaurant erupted in laughter. Even the bartender let out a relieved chuckle. A few diners clapped. Jessica, feeling a mix of terror and relief, swallowed hard. Yes, sir. Right away." She turned on her heels and practically sprinted to the kitchen. The aftermath, a lesson she would never forget for the rest of the evening. Jessica made sure that Clint's meal was perfect. She personally delivered his steak, refilled his drink before he even asked, and even offered him a free dessert. Clint, to his credit, acted like nothing had happened. He enjoyed his meal, left a generous tip, and as he stood up to leave, he gave Jessica one last nod. "You've got guts, kid," he said with a wink. Then he strolled out, just like a cowboy riding off into the sunset. The moment the doors swung shut behind him, Jessica collapsed into a chair, letting out a deep breath. "I almost lost my job," she mumbled. The bartender patted her on the back, grinning. "Yeah. But at least you got a story to tell for the rest of your life." The story goes viral a few days later. A diner who had been at the restaurant that night posted about the encounter on social media. The post exploded overnight, racking up millions of views. People couldn't get enough of the story. Speech balloon. Clint Eastwood is the definition of cool. Imagine roasting your own boss without even knowing it. Speech balloon. He could have fired her on the spot, but instead, he made it hilarious. What a legend. Speech balloon. That waitress will never live this down. Face with tears of joy. Even major news outlets picked it up. Soon, reporters were calling the Mission Ranch to confirm the story. Jessica, now an internet sensation, finally embraced the humor in it. "I learned my lesson," she said in an interview. "Never judge a book by its cover. And definitely Google your boss before you make fun of them." As for Clint Eastwood, when asked about the incident in a rare interview, he simply chuckled and said, "She's lucky I wasn't feeling like Dirty Harry that night." And just like that, he left everyone with one more legendary story to add to his name. Moral of the story? Heavy checkmark. Treat everyone with respect, you never know who they might be. Heavy checkmark. Clint Eastwood is still the coolest man alive. Heavy checkmark. If you're gonna insult someone, make sure they don't own the place first.